The photograph was the only thing missing. Not the jewelry, not the cash left folded in an envelope on the kitchen counter, not the laptop, still open, its screen casting pale blue light across an otherwise undisturbed room. Whoever had been inside that apartment had walked past everything of value and taken only a single framed photograph from the wall. Detective Mara Voss stood in the doorway of apartment 4C and felt something she hadn't felt in 11 years on the job: unease without reason. The resident, a 34-year-old woman named Claire Ashford, had been reported missing 48 hours earlier by her sister. No signs of forced entry, no struggle. Claire's coat was still hanging by the door. Her keys were on the hook. Her phone sat charging on the nightstand like it was waiting for her to come back. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for the rectangular shadow on the living room wall, a clean, pale outline where something had hung for years, long enough to leave its ghost in the paint. A photograph. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on either side, a hook still in the plaster. Mara stepped closer. She could see faint dust lines along the shelf beneath it, the kind that form when an object sits in one place, undisturbed for a very long time. Someone had removed that photograph carefully, deliberately, not in a hurry, not in a rage, with purpose. The question that would consume the next 7 days of Mara's life wasn't "Where is Claire Ashford?" though that answer would come in the worst possible way. The question was, who was in that photograph, and why did they need to disappear?
6:14 on a Tuesday morning. Detective Mara Voss had been awake since 5, sitting at her kitchen table with cold coffee and a case file she'd already read 3 times. When her phone buzzed, she didn't rush. She read the address, memorized it, and put on her coat. Apartment 4C, 11th floor, a building that smelled like old carpet and central heating, the kind of place where people live quietly and are forgotten easily. The responding officer, a young man named Delvey, met her at the elevator. He had the look of someone who wanted to say nothing to see here, but couldn't quite commit to it. "No signs of forced entry," he said, walking beside her down the hallway. Neighbor called it in, said the resident, Claire Ashford, 34, hadn't answered her door in 2 days, mail piling up, that sort of thing. "Sister filed a missing persons yesterday," Mara said. She already knew. She'd read the file in the car. Delvey nodded. "We ran her card. Last transaction was Thursday, a grocery store 4 blocks from here. Nothing since." The apartment door was already open. Mara paused at the threshold. She had walked into hundreds of rooms that had seen violence. She knew what they felt like, the particular weight of air in a space where something terrible had happened. This room didn't feel like that. It felt like a held breath. Claire Ashford's coat hung on the hook by the door, neat, deliberate, a woman's everyday routine preserved in perfect stillness. Keys on the counter, a phone on the nightstand, screen dark, plugged into its charger. A half-finished novel face down on the couch, spine creased at page 211. Mara moved through each room slowly, gloves on, eyes methodical. Kitchen, dishes in the drying rack, a mug with a ring of dried tea at the bottom. Bedroom, bed made, closet full, nothing missing. Bathroom, toothbrush, makeup, reading glasses folded on the sink. She came back to the living room. It was Delvey who pointed to it first, though Mara had already seen it the moment she walked in. She'd been saving it. "There," he said, "between the bookshelves." On the wall, between 2 floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with paperbacks and small framed prints, was a rectangular outline, pale against the cream paint, clean-edged, the unmistakable ghost of something that had hung in one place undisturbed for years. A hook still in the plaster, a thin line of dust along the shelf ledge below,
pushed slightly to one side, as if the frame had been lifted carefully, deliberately, by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. Everything in this apartment had been left behind. One thing had been taken. Mara stared at the pale outline on the wall and felt the investigation shift beneath her feet, the way ground shifts before something underneath it gives way. A photograph, she thought. Someone came here.
Drove 90 minutes to get to the precinct, and she arrived looking like someone who hadn't slept since Thursday. She was 3 years older than Claire, with the same sharp cheekbones and a way of holding her coffee cup in both hands, like warmth was something she had to hold on to deliberately. Mara sat across from her in the soft-lit interview room and let the silence settle before she spoke. "Tell me about your sister," Mara said. "Not what she did for work, not her routine. Tell me who she was." Dana's eyes moved to the table. "Private," she said. "She was always private, even as a kid. She didn't like people knowing too much about her." A pause. "It got worse about 4 years ago. She moved here, changed her number, didn't tell me her new address for 2 months." "Did she say why?" "She said she wanted a fresh start." Dana looked up. "I believed her. I shouldn't have pushed harder." Mara kept her voice even. "Was there anyone she mentioned? Someone from her past? Someone she seemed uncomfortable talking about?" Dana's fingers tightened around the cup. "There was a name," she said slowly, "about 6 months ago. We were on the phone and I mentioned I'd run into someone from her old university, just in passing, and I said something like, 'Do you remember that group you used to hang around sophomore year?' And she went completely quiet." "What happened?" "She asked me if I'd talked to any of them. I said no, I'd just seen a name online somewhere, and her whole voice changed. She said, 'Dana, if you ever hear from someone named Marcus, don't tell him where I am. Don't tell him anything about me.'" Mara wrote the name down. Marcus. "Did she explain who he was?" "No, she asked and she said it was nothing, just an old falling out. But she didn't sound like it was nothing." Dana set down her cup. She sounded the way people sound when they're scared and trying not to show it. After Dana left, Mara sat alone in the interview room. 4 years ago, Claire Ashford had moved cities, changed her number, gone quiet. 6 months ago, the name Marcus had frightened her enough to warn her sister. And sometime in the last 5 days, someone had walked into her apartment, calmly, without forcing the lock, and removed a single photograph from her wall. The shape of something was forming at the edges of this case. Mara didn't have enough pieces yet to name it, but she could feel it. She went back to her desk and opened Claire Ashford's background file. And that was where the investigation stopped on the surface. Claire Marie Ashford, born 1991, no criminal record, no outstanding warrants, worked as a freelance graphic designer. 2 prior addresses, both in cities at least 4 hours apart from each other. Quiet life, unremarkable on paper. But Mara had learned over 11 years that the most carefully constructed lives were often the ones hiding the most deliberate architecture. She ran a deeper search. The results came back in under 3 minutes, and Mara read them twice before she moved. 4 years ago, almost exactly to the month, a woman named Claire Marie Ashford had filed a legal name change in the state of Ohio. Her original name was Claire Marie Pennick. Mara typed the original name into the system. The first result wasn't a criminal record. It wasn't a court document. It was a case file, filed 9 years ago out of a small county sheriff's office in a town called Veldon Falls. The case was listed as closed, accidental death, a fire at a rented lake house, one fatality, a 22-year-old named Joel Hart. 5 people had been in that house the weekend of the fire. 4 of them had given statements. Mara scrolled to the witness list. The 4th name on the list was Claire Pennick. She went back to the top of the case file, read it once carefully. Then she noticed something that sent a slow chill through her. The investigating officer's notes near the bottom, the kind of detail that gets buried in paperwork and never followed up on, contained a single line. 5th occupant of property unaccounted for at time of statements, identity not confirmed. 5 people, 4 statements, 1 dead, and 1 who had never been found. Mara sat back in her chair. The pale outline on Claire Ashford's wall, a photograph removed with precision and care. Someone erasing a record, she thought. Someone removing the proof that they were ever there. She reached for her phone and booked a car to
was the
Belden
kind of
Falls.
town that appeared on maps, but not in conversations. 2 hours off the interstate, down a state highway that narrowed gradually, as if the road itself was losing confidence. Mara drove through flat farmland that gave way to pine forest, and the forest gave way to a main street with a hardware store, a diner, a post office that looked like it closed at noon, and not much else. She arrived at 11:40 in the morning. The sky was low and white. The air smelled like rain that hadn't decided to fall yet. She had Marcus Hale's last known address, a rural route number attached to a property 3 miles outside of town. But she didn't go there first. She had learned a long time ago that you didn't walk into a small town and start knocking on doors without knowing what the walls were made of. She went to the diner. It was called Patsy's. 4 booths, a counter with 6 stools, a woman behind the register who looked like she'd been there since the building was built. Mara ordered coffee and a piece of pie she didn't want and sat at the counter. The woman, her name tag read Bev, refilled Mara's cup without being asked. "Passing through?" she said. Not suspicious, just the particular curiosity of someone who cataloged strangers as a habit. "Doing some research," she said. "Old property dispute. Boring work." She smiled in a way that invited people to stop asking. "I'm looking at a lake house that burned down about 9 years ago, out near Miller Road, I think. You remember that?" Bev's expression didn't change much, but something behind her eyes did. A small, careful adjustment, the way a person looks when they've decided how much they're willing to say. "I remember," Bev said. "Young people renting for the summer. Terrible thing." "Did you know any of them? The ones who were staying there?" Bev wiped the counter slowly. "They came in a few times, a group, 5 of them, 4 girls and a boy, or maybe 2 boys, I don't remember exactly." She shook her head. "After the fire, the ones who were left came in once more. Looked like they'd seen something they couldn't unsee." A pause. "Never came back after that." Mara set a photograph of Claire on the counter. Bev looked at it for a long moment. "That one," she said quietly. "She sat right where you're sitting." Mara left the diner and drove toward Miller Road. The lake house was gone, of course. 9 years of weather and overgrowth had reclaimed most of the foundation, but the land was still there, a clearing at the edge of a gray lake, ringed by pines, utterly still. Mara stood at the tree line and looked at it. 5 people came here, she thought. 1 never left, and someone has spent 9 years making sure the
Adjacent
others
to Marcus
can't forget.
Hale's last known address was against a retired couple named the Grenvilles. Mara knocked because the driveway to Hale's place was gated and padlocked, not the casual lock of someone who valued privacy, but the deliberate hardware of someone who had thought carefully about keeping people out, or keeping themselves in. The man who answered the Grenville door was in his 70s, with the slow, assessing eyes of someone who had spent decades watching things without commenting on them. Marcus Hale, Mara said, after she'd shown her badge and kept her explanations simple. Your neighbor. How long has he lived there? 7 years, give or take, the man said. His name was Gerald. He didn't invite her inside, but he didn't close the door either. Keeps to himself, not unfriendly, just contained. Has he had any visitors lately? Anything unusual in the last few weeks? Gerald thought about it with the unhurried patience of a man who didn't see the value in rushing. His sister came by last month, and then about 2 weeks ago, a car I didn't recognize. Parked at the gate for a while, didn't go in. He scratched the back of his neck. Marcus came out, looked at it, went back inside. Car left after about 10 minutes. What kind of car? Dark, sedan maybe. I didn't get the plates. My wife might have. She watches more than I do. He glanced back inside the house. She's resting. I'd rather not disturb her. Of course. Mara handed him a card. If you think of anything else. She walked back to the gate of Hale's property and stood looking at the house beyond it, a low, single-story structure, curtains drawn, a truck parked in front of it that hadn't moved recently enough to leave fresh tire tracks. She called out his name once, clearly, and identified herself. A long pause. Then the curtain in the front window shifted. Another 30 seconds passed. The front door opened. Marcus Hale was 41 years old, but he moved like a man who carried 20 years more than that on him. Medium height, dark circles, the careful, watchful stillness of someone who had been waiting for a knock on the door for a very long time and had never fully decided what he would do when it came. He looked at her badge. He looked at her face. Is it Claire? His voice was flat with a specific kind of dread, the dread of someone asking a question they already believe they know the answer to. She's missing. I'd like to talk to you about Veldon Falls. Something moved through his expression, not surprise, something older than surprise.
The inside
stepped
of Marcus
aside,
Hale's
let her
house was the interior of a man living at careful distance from the world. No photographs on the walls. Mara noticed that immediately. Not a single one. Bare hooks in a few places. The small circular wounds left behind when a picture has been removed and the hole left unplugged. Bookshelves, a desk covered in paperwork, a window with a direct line of sight to the gate. He made coffee without asking if she wanted any. She took the cup because she understood it for what it was, something for his hands to do. How long has she been missing? He asked, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. 5 days confirmed, possibly longer. Mara set her notebook on the table, but didn't open it. Her apartment was undisturbed, no signs of struggle, no signs she left under duress. She paused. One thing was taken from her apartment, a framed photograph from the living room wall. Marcus Hale set his coffee cup down. The color left his face so completely and so quickly that Mara instinctively leaned forward. "Marcus," she said carefully, "do you know who took it?" He didn't answer immediately. He stared at the table with the expression of a man doing arithmetic in his head, calculating something he'd been calculating for years, checking it one last time now that the numbers had finally come due. "How many of us are left?" he said. "How many of who?" He looked up. "From the lake house that summer. How many of us are still—" He stopped, pressed his mouth shut, tried again. "Are the others accounted for? Has anyone checked on them?" Mara felt something tighten in her chest. "Tell me what I'm looking at, Marcus." He stood up, walked to the desk, opened the bottom drawer and removed a folder, not a casual folder, but one that had been kept deliberately, organized with the quiet obsessiveness of a person who had been building a private case file for years. He set it on the table in front of her. Inside, printouts, dates, names. 3 names Mara didn't recognize yet, but would before the week was out. Next to each name, a date circled in red. He's been doing it for 3 years. Marcus said. His voice was very quiet now. The first one, Priya, she disappeared and no one connected it because we'd all scattered, different states, different lives, but I knew. I've always known he'd come eventually. He looked at Mara with exhausted, terrified clarity. He takes the photograph first. He told me that. He told me years ago what he'd do. I thought it was grief talking. I thought, "Who?" Mara said. "Who told you?" Marcus's jaw tightened. Joel Hart had a brother. His name is Daniel, and 9 years ago, after the inquest, after we all gave our statements and went back to our lives, he stopped, looked at the bare wall across from him. He came to see me, just once. He stood in my doorway and he said, "I know what happened in that house, and I'm going to take everything from each of you, the way you took everything from him. I'm going to start with the photographs, so you know it's me, so you know I'm coming." The room was silent. Mara looked at the folder, at the circled dates, at Claire Ashford's name last on the list. He's collecting them that arrive like storms, loud, sudden, breaking everything in their path. And there are confessions that arrive the way Marcus Hales did, slowly, in pieces, like a man dismantling a wall he'd spent years building, brick by careful brick, because he'd finally run out of reasons to keep it standing. Mara didn't rush him. She sat across the kitchen table in that bare, careful house and let the silence do the work that questions couldn't. Outside, the wind had picked up. The pine trees at the edge of the property moved in long, slow waves. "There were 5 of us that summer," Marcus said. "Me, Claire," she was still Claire Pennick then, "Priya, a girl named Sasha, and Joel." He turned his coffee cup in slow circles on the table. Joel was different from the rest of us, quieter, more serious. He wasn't part of the original group. Priya had invited him. He and she had been close the year before. "What happened the night of the fire?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "We'd been drinking," he said. Not heavily, but enough. It was late July, hot, and we'd been at the lake most of the day. Joel had been off that week, withdrawn. We knew he was struggling with something, but none of us asked properly." His voice tightened. "That's the thing. None of us asked." Mara waited. "That night, Joel and Priya argued. We all heard it, his voice through the wall of the bedroom, her voice raised, then quiet. Then Joel left the house, went down to the dock alone." Marcus pressed both hands flat on the table. Sasha was smoking on the back porch. "She fell asleep," she said later. "She didn't mean to, but she had a candle lit, and when she went inside..." He stopped. "The porch caught first," he said. "By the time we smelled smoke, it had moved to the back bedroom wall." His eyes were somewhere else now, somewhere 9 years back, in the orange light of a burning house. "We got out, all of us. Claire called the fire department. We stood on the lawn and we counted each other, and we were all there, all 5 of us. And then," his voice fractured, "and then Joel walked back up from the dock. He saw the house burning, and he ran back in." Mara stilled. "He ran back in," Marcus repeated. "None of us understood it, not at first. We were screaming for him to stop, and then the roof came down and..." He closed his eyes. "They said afterward that he'd gone back for something. His bag was found near the door, partially melted. Inside it, among other things, was a bottle of his medication, antidepressants, a prescription that had run out 2 weeks before." The room was very quiet. A young man, struggling and unasked. A fire, a decision made in seconds that could never be unmade. "You weren't responsible for the fire," Mara said carefully. Marcus looked at her with 9 years of complicated grief in his eyes. "No," he said, "but we were responsible for not seeing him, for not asking, for leaving him alone that night when we all knew something was wrong. He exhaled slowly, and when the investigators came and asked us about the evening, about his state of mind, about the argument, we minimized it. We were 22 years old, and we were frightened, and we told each other it wouldn't help anyone to complicate the story. So we kept it simple: accidental fire, tragic outcome. His voice dropped to almost nothing. We let Joel Hart become a footnote. Outside, the first drops of rain began to hit the window. "And Daniel Hart?" said Mara quietly. Marcus nodded. Daniel Hart was close to Joel, closer than anyone. He knew Joel had been struggling. He knew the argument had happened. And when he read our statements, so clean, so careful, he knew we had smoothed it over. A pause. He was 26 years old when his brother died. He spent the next 3 years finding out everything we'd left out. Mara looked down at the folder, at the name written at the bottom of Marcus's private list. Claire Ashford, last known contact 4 months ago. She picked up her phone.
Back in her car, with the rain coming down
hard against the windshield, Mara worked the phone and the laptop simultaneously with the focused efficiency of someone who had stopped sleeping mentally 3 hours ago. She pulled up Priya Anand first, the name Marcus had circled with the earliest date. Missing persons report filed 3 years ago in Portland, Oregon. Case flagged as voluntary disappearance after 6 months, downgraded, eventually closed. No body found, no confirmed sighting. Sasha Oral, 2 years ago, Minneapolis, same pattern. Apartment left intact, no signs of struggle. 1 item missing from her home, noted in the report almost as an afterthought by the responding officer, a framed photograph removed from the hallway wall. Mara stared at that line. It had been there the whole time, sitting in a case file in Minneapolis, unconnected to a case file in Portland, unconnected to an apartment in apartment 4C, 11 floors above a city street. 3 women, 3 clean disappearances, 3 photographs removed. No one had connected them because there was no surface reason to. Different cities, different lives, different investigators. The threads existed. They had always existed, but they were thin and widely spaced, and the world gave no one a reason to pull on all of them at once. Until now. Mara called her partner back at the precinct, a methodical, unflappable man named Reyes, who she trusted with exactly this kind of architecture. "I need you to run a cross-reference," she said. "Missing persons, last 3 years, women aged 29 to 36. Filter for cases with no signs of forced entry, no criminal history, personal items left behind." She paused. "And specifically, any case notes mentioning a photograph removed from the premises." She heard him typing. "That's a wide net," he said. "I know. It's a patient man." While she rated, she opened Daniel Hart's background file on her laptop. She had requested it from the county sheriff's office 40 minutes ago, and it had just come through. Daniel Hart, 43 years old, no criminal record, not even a traffic citation, steady work history, a man who had, by every official measure, lived a quiet and unremarkable life since his brother's death. Except, there was a gap. 3 years after the fire, roughly coinciding, Mara noted carefully, with when he would have finished piecing together what had really happened, Daniel Hart sold his apartment, closed his bank account, and dropped off the traceable grid for almost 18 months. No tax filings, no registered address, no digital footprint. He had reappeared quietly with a new address in a mid-sized city in another state, new bank, new phone number, as if he too had rebuilt himself from scratch. He'd spent those 18 months planning, Mara thought, learning, preparing. Reyes came back on the line. "I've got 2 additional matches," he said, "both unsolved, both with photograph removal noted in evidence logs." A pause. "Mara, one of them is 4 years old. That predates your Portland case." Mara's hand tightened on the phone. He'd started earlier than Marcus knew. "Pull everything," she said, "and find me a current address for Daniel Hart. Whatever you can get, utility records, rental agreements, anything." She ended the call and sat for a moment in the drum of rain on the roof. 4 women, 4 disappearances. Claire was the last name on Marcus's list, the last member of the Lake House group still unaccounted for, which meant Daniel Hart was either already finished or almost. A detail surfaced suddenly from the back of her mind, something Dana Ashford had said in the interview room almost in passing. Claire was recently anxious. She'd been acting differently for the last few months. 4 months ago, Marcus had said, last known contact with Claire. Mara pulled up Claire's phone records on the laptop, scanned backward through the months. There, 4 months ago, a number she didn't recognize, called once for 47 seconds. She ran the number. It came back registered to a prepaid carrier, disposable, untraceable in any direct sense. But the tower ping on that call placed it within a 12-mile radius of a mid-sized city, the same city where Daniel Hart's new address was registered. He'd called her first, Mara realized. He'd wanted her to know he was coming. Reyes sent through the address 40 seconds later.
The motel
Mara
was
put the
called the
car in
Lakeview,
drive.
which was either accidental irony or something more deliberate. Mara couldn't decide which, and the question sat uneasily with her the entire drive. It was a single-story building off a state route, the kind of place that charged by the week and didn't ask questions. 12 units, a parking lot with 3 cars in it, a vacancy sign that buzzed faintly in the rain. Reyes had traced a cash payment, routed painstakingly through a rental car company's loyalty account, linked to an old email address, to Unit 9, registered 4 days ago. 2 days after Claire Ashford's photograph was taken. Mara called for backup before she got out of the car, kept the call short and direct. One possible suspect, one possible victim, approach quiet. She was told 12 minutes. She waited 9. Then she heard something that made the calculation change. A voice muffled through the thin wall of Unit 9. Not a scream, not a struggle, a conversation, low and uneven. One voice rising slightly and then pulling back. The specific texture of 2 people in a room with a very long and very painful history between them. She moved to the door, knocked once, clearly, identified herself. Silence. Then the sound of something being set down, a glass maybe, or a chair shifting, and footsteps. The door opened. Daniel Hart was not what Mara had been bracing for, and she had learned long ago to distrust that particular feeling, the instinct to expect a monster and find instead a person. He was lean, unremarkable, with the kind of face that would disappear in a crowd. He looked at her badge with eyes that held no surprise whatsoever, only the exhausted calm of a man who had always known the math would eventually resolve. "Detective," he said. "Step back from the door," she said. He did. Claire Ashford was sitting on the far bed, coat on, hands in her lap. Unhurt physically, Mara's eyes moved over her with professional speed and confirmed it. Pale, shaking faintly, but present. The photograph was on the table beside her. Mara saw it in the same instant Claire looked at it. A faded snapshot, slightly sun-bleached, in a simple wooden frame. 5 young people on a dock. A bright summer day, all of them laughing, squinting into the sun. The particular unguarded joy of people who don't yet know what the next weeks will bring. Joel Hart was in the center, Much
grinning.
later, after the room had filled with officers and the formal machinery of consequence had begun to grind, Mara sat in her car in the motel parking lot and read the statement Claire had given in the hour before backup arrived. Daniel Hart had not hurt her. He had taken her. She had opened the door to him because she recognized his face from an old photograph Joel had kept, and because some part of her, she admitted, had been waiting for this moment for 9 years and had been too tired to keep running. He had kept her in this room, he told her, because he needed her to see it, the photograph, all of their faces, Joel's face. He hadn't planned, in the end, to do what he had done to the others. Mara would discover this later through the investigation. Priya and Sasha and the others were alive, relocated, held temporarily, and then released in isolated locations, frightened but unharmed. His intent, it emerged, had never been permanent erasure. It had been haunting. He had wanted them to live with the knowledge that he could find them, that he had found them, that the story they had told, the clean, careful, insufficient story, had not been the last word. Mara drove back toward the city as the rain finally stopped. She thought about Joel Hart, 22 years old, walking back into a burning house for a bag he'd left behind. She thought about the medication inside it, about the argument no one had reported, about 5 young people standing on a lawn, counting each other, getting to 5, and then watching the number become 4 in a matter of seconds. She thought about Daniel Hart's face in that motel doorway, not monstrous, not triumphant, just finished. A man who had carried something enormous for 9 years and had finally, in whatever incomplete and broken way, set it down. She thought about Claire Ashford sitting on that bed, looking at the photograph, looking at Joel's face, young and grinning, frozen in a summer that had ended before any of them understood it was ending. There was no version of this case where everyone walked away clean. That was the thing about the cases that stayed with you. They didn't resolve into clarity. They resolved into weight, the kind you carry differently as the years pass, but never fully set down. Mara merged onto the interstate. The city lights appeared in the distance, pale and steady against the dark. She thought about the rectangular ghost on Claire Ashford's wall, a photograph, the only thing missing, not jewelry, not cash, not the laptop still glowing in the dark. A record of a moment, a proof of presence, 5 people standing in sunlight before everything changed. Someone had needed the world to remember that Joel Hart had been in that photograph. And in the end, Mara thought, gripping the wheel, watching the lights grow closer, maybe that was the only true thing in this entire case. He had been there. He had mattered, and for 9 years, the people who should have said so hadn't. The photograph had been the beginning of the story all along. Claire Ashford returned to her apartment on a Thursday morning. She stood in the living room doorway for a long time, looking at the pale outline on the wall between the bookshelves. Then she crossed the room, took the photograph, returned to her by the investigators, evidence processed, case formally opened, and held it for a moment. She didn't hang it back up. She sat on the couch beside her face-down novel, still open to page 211, and looked at it until the light in the room changed. That, Mara thought, when she heard about it later, that was where the case truly ended. Not in a motel room, not in a courtroom, but in a quiet apartment with a woman sitting alone, finally letting herself look at what she had spent 9 years trying not to see. Some cases end in handcuffs. Some cases end in courtrooms. Some cases in the particular silence of a person sitting alone with the weight of what they survived and what they owed. This one began with a missing photograph, and it ended, finally, with someone choosing to look at it.